Om Namaste. Welcome to Satsang today. As we're here settling out of the energies of the world and deeper into our core, our essential nature becomes more available to be met. And as we prepare to enter into meditation, we can keep in mind for a little bit that when we close the eyes, we should also be aware of what we're watching inside too, and try to just withdraw from that also, so that we can just sit and rest in that undisturbed core essential being of our truth here. And the deeper and the more, let's say, the more accurately we are able to recognize that which is pulling on our attention outward in reference to that core center of truth inside, then we can become more familiar with what it means to abide in our truth, and not let our attention get so far pulled outward that we forget about that same truth that's there the moment we wake up in the morning. If we're lucky, it's before an alarm clock scares us into the human existence every morning. Some people do this. It's a useful tool, but I guess I understand now you can put some gentler things on your alarm clock. But anyway, that place that's there before any of that takes place in the morning is still what's here. It's been here all day. Here meaning your here-ness in the presence of what's unfolding. Now, if we let the mind make that about the body, then we've missed it completely. Because the story about the body getting it is already after that alarm clock, that initial awakening into the regular common human world. But as we search deeper for what's looking inside, where we're receiving the information from everything we're perceiving, all this the changeful environment, you see the cars out on the street and the people walking down sidewalks, and we can do ordinary things like that and still remember that depth of truth within ourselves. Not as a memory, it's not so much important to hold the memory, but to really use the memory to check in again to that same depth of unchanging awareness. One of the things I would like to emphasize again is really watching the direction of attention. Watching the direction of attention firstly allows us to see, okay, is the attention engaged in mind? We can check this stuff. We can put a little level of monitoring in there just to see what's going on with our inner experience on the level of our attention. And as we do that, maybe we'll get a glimpse of something that we're holding on to that we get an opportunity to let go and just be here. So what doesn't work like that is the feeling of putting a lot of effort in to achieve some future goal. If it feels like that, then the approach is already somehow still caught up in the story in the mind. So just checking in, once again refreshing, okay, this is the present moment. and checking in with this, it really withdraws the attention from what's not here, what's not happening. And by doing that, it allows us to recognize within our own experience, our own inner verification, that what's not happening yet in the future isn't as important as, hey, we're actually here. This is happening. Life is happening right now. Spiritual awakening in general is not something that happens via the sharpness of mind or the content that we can collect to get somewhere with, good bits of the map or information, so to speak. But it's really an exploration deeper into that mystery within that doesn't know yet. That mystery that doesn't know yet is where we're looking from. It's our place of natural wonderment, and that wonderment is it's kind of our awe and our inspiration in a very in a beautiful place that isn't so much stirred up with what's going on in the mind. And as that recognition unfolds, watching the mind try to present some kind of information that supports some kind of something. That's what it's doing. It's going and getting information. What about this? That's important. What about this? It's important too. But those urges are what are drawing our attention in a way into something not so clear. But it really is as simple as the attention going to the imagination instead of the present moment. It really is that simple. When our attention wanders into the imagination, there's a possibility that it goes deep enough to where it's just a daydream, isn't it? And that can happen a lot in the mind. But if we're able to notice even the daydreams, what's that? What's there that can notice, oh, wait a minute, I need to come back to presence. The instantaneous urge are in our intuitive center. To be drawn back to our state of peaceful existence in the present moment, it really kind of supersedes any story that follows it. Anyway, we can watch the imagination do all kinds of fancy things. And in that movement, somehow the grace that's there to help us bring us back to presence is also something to be, contemplated, because without that grace, we wouldn't have the opportunity to get out of the suffering of future, because we're so anxious about A, B, and C, and D working out, the way that we want them to. So coming to the present means we can check. We can check and see if these kinds of structures are being entertained in the mind. Whatever is looking for anything other than the present moment, there's quite a bit of it at first for most seekers. But as we learn to check in, the individual may become more deeply attuned to that which isn't caught up. It isn't produced by the mind. It isn't produced through any kind of special gifts or efforts or anything like that. Just being present with what's happening and allowing space for it to be so. You know, it's like we're shining a spotlight on the mind and the mind's caught. You know, I'm not you, okay, right? But that light inside that's able to watch the mind, that's who you are, that's where you're looking from. But in that catching the mind, and not to say that you need to go out and be the one that catches the mind, because again, that's just another form of movement. So to speak about it is to also cause waves in that, but you know, to try to share it and try to give someone something to look for within, you know, we have to use language within its limitations. But what happens sometimes is that something deeper is listening, something deeper can hear it, and grace is present to allow that transmission to take place. What is the transmission? What are we talking about? Transmission. Transmission of what? Really, an easy way to talk about it, which you know also has its limitations, is that somehow there's a providence that's made within the place where the spirit and the soul are together. And in that, there's a waking up that happens. And that waking up isn't a future event that's going to happen for someone. It's a waking up out of the someoneness and into something that's subjective in quality. Just simply becoming aware that where one is looking from is already that place. The instant of that recognition is what this is all about. That instantaneous recognition of, wait a minute, I'm not in my mind. I'm doing stuff with my mind. Now, who is the my? It sounds very ordinary to say my mind, but who is the my that has the mind? We don't look very often to see who is it that's giving life to, you know, giving space to, or entertaining the thoughts in the mind, or withdrawing from them. And when you see that it's definitely connecting, those movements are definitely connecting to the attention, then we're onto something. Then we're onto something, because if the attention is near the core of what we're looking for, then it must be the attention where the attention is not moving that we could call home. So whatever searching for it is on the perimeter of that, you see? Because you can see the search happening, yeah? If you can verify that in your own experience without just taking on a concept and saying, well, this was said this way or this was said this way, you check there and see if your attention is able to withdraw from things. That can become part of your practice. If you practice that, then what you're doing is you're enabling the attention to be already in a deeper place than the imagination. Yeah? Not that imagination is a negative thing. It can be used for many good things. But we don't want to imagine our eternal outcome without actually having some kind of substance to it, without being able to verify it. Otherwise, we're kind of just walking through it all blindly. We are in a way anyway, but there are clues that we get along the way that kind of give us insights that, hey, somehow this was synchronizing to help me out, and I couldn't really quite put my finger on it, but it just worked out, right? We have situations that do that. Those kinds of things tell us that it's not just our own efforts that are producing our outcome, even on the human level. Our choices have a lot to play with that, but there's also this greater framework that's holding the play itself together. That same framework is also what biblical context calls faith. Faith and who you are in reality, in the depths of your eternal reality in the present moment, this moment. They're holding together. So it's not really so much about the journey of getting somewhere as it is the journey of exploring the way that it's already structured inside. When you get into a car for the first time, you probably studied where the steering wheel is, what the levers do, so you can try to be on top of it. You remember those days by chance? Well, it's kind of like that too when we go on our spiritual journey. We have to figure out, well, where do we hang on to in a domain that's mostly subjective, meaning it's not tangible with the fleshly hands or the eyes or these ears inside. What do we hang on to in that place where even our hands are not there? And the place I'm talking about, if you want to be a little clearer on it in your exploration, maybe you can see it's the place where we hold our minds. That same place where we hold our minds is also the place where we can let go of our minds. And depending on the depth that one reaches in that release, in that surrender, there can be so many different experiences of that release. Why is the release so important? Because we don't recognize when we're in our dream state in the mind, in the imagination, we don't recognize sometimes the amount of suffering that our emotional climate is enduring just because we can't really deal with what we're doing in our mind. Our mind character is doing this project to get this done, or you know what I mean? It's always trying to build or fix or manage or do something. And the deeper into ego one is, the more that whole dynamic looks like victimhood, right? I'm a victim of X, Y, and Z, and I need to hold on to that because I'm lacking, I'm not strong. And we can laugh at that the moment we can see it clearly. The moment we recognize that we can see that in the mind and that we're looking at the mind, then those kinds of stories presented in the mind don't have to be purchased. They're not who we really are. Not in the deepest sense. The spontaneous meeting of it is the meeting that doesn't need to be there to take mental snapshots and rely upon those in order to have a sense of self, to have a sense of purpose, to have a sense of accomplishment in this human experience.